Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Deal Breakdown. I'm Wesley with Maton Real Estate, your buyer specialist.
And I'm Fong with Trend Property Group, your seller specialist.
And together
We are the Deal Breakdown.
Welcome to episode 4. And episode 4 is actually special because we're going to be kicking off a wholly different format. Now, before, our goal was to release 2 episodes a month at an hour and a half each. And we've been fairly consistent with that. And at the same time, we have sent this podcast out to friends, family, acquaintances, clients, and we've gotten a lot of feedback, which we really appreciate. And what would we be without responding to feedback as realtors? And the biggest thing that we've heard is our episodes are a little bit too long. It's not that that's a bad thing. It's just that we're talking about so many things, so many ideas that for first-time home buyers or people selling for the first time, it's a lot of information to digest and they can't pick up everything. So now we're going to be switching to 30-minute episodes every single week. Nice bite-size, easy to digest episodes, and hopefully that's going to help a little bit. Fong, what are your thoughts on the new format?
I like it. I mean, I definitely think it's going to be a lot more attractive to our current listeners and viewerships. And so you made a very good point. It's going to be good to just have those bite-sized nuggets of information, because sometimes if we're talking about for an hour, hour and a half, it can be a little overwhelming, especially for first-time buyers or sellers, or even, individuals who've been doing residential real estate for a number of years. And, from talking about different current events as well as different transaction stories, I think, shorten it down, listening to the feedback, and really it's going to help this venture grow.
And that's a great segue into what our format's going to be. So each week, everything is going to be in sets of 3. So the first week and today's episode will be about current events. So we're going to talk about a current event or 2, depending on the amount of time that we have. And then the next week will be all about transaction stories. And then the third week will be more free form. So we're going to take listener questions. We're going to respond to things we've seen on social media, just a little bit more free form. And then that's just going to repeat every 3 episodes. So again, we're still going to have much of the same content, just more often and a little bit easier to digest, especially if you're going on a commute to work, you got 30 minutes. We want you to be able to listen to that whole thing, be able to think about it, and digest everything before the next episode. So let's kick it off with our current event. So Fong, I'm going to pitch it over to you. Let's hear about this aptly named current event.
Yeah. So I picked up on this article, I think about a week ago. It actually came out very recently. And as, people who know me really well, I'm a very economic-driven individual. So I like to really look at the data, because if we're looking at a national economy, that's important for us to realize that it could potentially have a pretty major impact on the real estate market. So, Wes, what I want to talk to you about today is the most depressing topic. It's the urban doom loop. And
doom. Wow, that's a big word. Okay, let's hear about it, Fong. What's the urban doom loop?
Well, I think it's important to first figure out what is an urban economic doom loop. And so the actual definition I'm reading here verbatim is it's where economic activity falls, which leads to decreased tax revenue, which makes it harder for, the public sector, the infrastructure to pay for these public services and really spark the economy. Now, why does this relate to us here in the Portland Metro? Because typically, if the national economy is increasing in terms of GDP, typically most metros follow that. But we are doing the exact opposite. So as the U.S. economy is improving, our Portland economy, or the Portland Metro economy, is actually decreasing. And there's 4 main topics that I want to talk to you guys today, and you especially, Wes, because I know you're into the political scene. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the population within the different counties: Multnomah County, Clark County across the river, Washington County, and Clackamas County. And so we know, 2 episodes ago we talked about the exodus of Portland Metro, downtown Portland, and we are starting to still see that. And so I'm looking at a graph here, and I know you're not going to be able to see it, but year over year since 2020, Multnomah County has seen a mass migration away from Multnomah County. We knew that. Clark County being the biggest, then Clackamas County, and then Washington County. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, point of clarification. When you say Clark County being the biggest, do you mean people are moving there mostly or?
Yes,
Okay.
it's Clark County is the usually if someone lives in Multnomah County or Portland Metro, they're moving to Clark County as that next segue.
Okay. So to answer your question, we've talked about this quite a lot. And I think a big thing is property taxes here in Multnomah County are astronomically high. It's I talk about it all the time with clients. It is so much more than these other three counties you've mentioned. So I could see why people would want to move away from that. So that I mean that first comes to mind, and then there's obviously some other things that
Yeah,
come
I
to
mean,
mind.
and taxes alone is the biggest. And so you made a very good point because I don't know if you know, Portland's economy is really heavily relied on high income earners. And if a high income earner is making so much amount of money, but then they have to fork over, 40% to the public or the government, then what amenities are there to keep them tied down to Portland Metro when there's homelessness, there's crimes, there's drugs? And so it's almost like what incentive should I continue living here in Portland versus going across the river and moving to Clark County in Vancouver, where I don't have to pay income tax, where things are more affordable and maybe I have more space and more freedom to do what I want to do, especially as a high income earner or even potentially a retired individual.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're talking more about an individual, maybe an employee, a worker, maybe not necessarily a business owner. They're thinking about their bottom line and if there's going to be amenities to make the cost of living here make sense. So I totally understand that. Obviously, in Clark County and Washington, you don't have state income tax, you have lower property tax. So a lot of people are going there. I think something we need to talk about as well. I don't know if this is going to be one of your points. I don't know these points, guys. Is the incentive for businesses to be in Portland? It could be encompassed within this point. We saw it and we still see it quite a lot with, again, I'm from California, so we see a lot of people leaving California, large businesses. Obviously, one that's really charged right now in the political sphere is Tesla. Well, Tesla obviously went over to Texas because of, I mean, Musk quoted the COVID lockdown rules and whatnot, but I know for a fact a lot of businesses are moving out of California because of the taxes. I'm sure it's very similar here as well. They're moving to states that are business friendly, right?
I mean, I could agree with you. And exactly, Portland, Oregon was once known for its thriving creative scene and progressive culture. Large companies such as Nike and Columbia, they've shifted some of their operations out even outside of Portland. And so they're seeking more business friendly environments, like you said, like Elon's doing with his company at Tesla. So at the same time, these smaller businesses, they're also finding it harder to operate amidst the increasing regulations, the increasing costs. As for consumers like you and I, as business owners like you and I, many are just moving to more of the suburban areas. Other cities like Boise, Salt Lake City, Austin, Texas, as we know, where housing is just more affordable. The quality of life is perceived as better. And the migration trend has really just sparked a debate whether, is Portland's future, can it overcome the challenges? Or if more business continue leaving downtown Portland, what's going to happen? It's one thing is clear. The city is at a crossroads with this urban doom and loop. And its once vibrant community, it's certainly, absolutely, I believe it within my heart, it can recover to pre pandemic levels. But it takes a lot of work and it takes this article that I'm reading about the urban doom loop to really come to fruition and come to light so people know what's going on.
Man, I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think that before I get into that, I don't want to lose what you were talking about, which was the population leaving. I would be curious to see if most of those left the state and so stopped being taxpayers for Oregon, or they just left Multnomah County and still consider Portland their home base, right? Because if you move to Beaverton, technically you're not paying those Multnomah taxes anymore. But Washington County now gets those taxes, and Washington County, I know for a fact, Washington County, Clackamas County, and Multnomah County work in tandem on most everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So honestly, I think the scariest thing, and people don't realize this, when you think of Seattle, okay, let's take Seattle. What are major businesses off the top of your head, major employers off the top of your head that you think of, Fong?
Off the top of my head, I mean,
We're talking HQ,
Microsoft,
big one,
Amazon,
big one,
Google.
big one.
Yeah, and so they're part of the FANG stock. So like these major, trillion, billion dollar companies.
Yes. And so why I'm bringing that up is because Seattle has these three major companies. I could keep going, right? I know Starbucks HQ's there, right? There's a lot of different large companies that work there. And so there's always going to be jobs. And again, we always want to bring this back to real estate. This is a real estate podcast. When you have people working at Amazon headquarters, when you have people working at Microsoft headquarters and they're hiring, then people are going to move to that city. They're going to spend their dollars on commerce. So businesses, for every job at Amazon, you create 10 more jobs. They have to go to the barber. They have to go to the doctor. They have to, eat food at the grocery store. They go to a restaurant on Friday night with their wife or whatever. And so you create jobs by creating that one job.
Yeah, and a good example would be looking at, what is it, Detroit, Michigan, where the major, was it Ford, I think?
Yep, the car crisis where the cars started. I'm going to cut you off. Where the cars in Detroit, production in Detroit tanked because most everything was being made overseas. Take Toyota, for example. They were just blowing them out of the water. So Detroit.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, when it comes to population growth or decline, it really stems from job growth, which is essentially the next section of the urban doom loop, is the Portland's job growth. And so this is verbatim from the article. Portland Metro is ranked 50th. 50th.
50th people.
Near the bottom
keeping that in.
of the job growth, which is low.
This is out of 81.
Correct.
Okay, so we're 50 out of 81.
We're comparing to like the 81 other metro cities within the entire U.S. And so if we're ranked in the lower 50, I mean, here's another little infographic that I'm reading. Before the pandemic, the average job salary in Multnomah County was $125,000, people. It is now $73,000. Now, this is obviously an average, but this, out of the four total counties that we have Clark County, Clackamas County, and then we have Washington County. Multnomah County is now the lowest average income at $73,000. The highest is Clackamas County, but 1,000 less is Clark County. So, and Clackamas County is known for having the most affordable property taxes within the state of Oregon. And of course, we know all the benefits that Clark County has as well.
So that's interesting. So because the reason behind of Metro, and we're going to go way back, we're going real basic here. The reason you have a Metro, the Los Angeles Metro, obviously this includes a lot of other municipalities, other cities around it, but they call it the Los Angeles Metro because most of the jobs are in Los Angeles. You call it the Seattle Metro because most of the jobs are in Seattle. People are commuting. That's why they call them, sleeper towns, commuter towns. They sleep there and then they commute over to Seattle to work. Here in Portland, they sleep in Vancouver and they commute usually to Portland. I'm going to go back to, first off, that is an alarming drop. Okay. That is an alarming drop, especially for the housing market. That is wild to me. So I mentioned the three big companies in Seattle. We can talk about Los Angeles being the hub of Hollywood and fitness. We could talk about New York being the hub of Wall Street and finance. We could go more and more. Portland, when you think of companies, I hope you think of Intel, right? I
Yeah.
hope you think of Nike, and maybe you think of Boeing. Maybe you think of Columbia at a smaller scale. So I think and this probably serves into what you're talking about, one of the most alarming things that happened over the last year was the layoffs at Intel. That was alarming because Intel's supposed to be our company here in this area that hires people at high paying jobs to keep the economy flush. That's our export, right? Is Intel. And if they're losing out, we're screwed.
Yeah, I helped a client last year towards the end of the year. He was a part of that massive Intel layoff. I believe he was from Minnesota, moved here probably like 15 years ago for Intel. It's him, his wife, two kids. He lost his job. He was the income guy. He was the breadwinner. So they ended up moving back to what they know because nothing was holding him down to remaining in the Pacific Northwest, especially if all their family resides in Minnesota.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure the cost of living in Minnesota is much less. So, I mean, to add to the doom here, for the doom spiral, one of my best buds, he works at Salesforce, and we have a Salesforce office here, and he will come up to visit, and he'll hop into the office, and that place was purged. They don't even have anybody working there right now, and he was telling me all about it. So it's not just these large companies we have to look out for that are hiring thousands and thousands of people. It's the companies that also have 50 people, that have 100 people. If they're losing out, then we're losing out, especially in real estate. When you look at Pearl District, how often are you hearing about restaurants or places shutting down in Pearl? They usually get replaced, but that's not good. We want places to expand. We want places to continue to grow in employment, because that always means that if there's people out in the world, we want to be the Minnesota this guy moved to, right? We don't want them to go to Minnesota, no offense. We want them to come here to earn the cost of, hopefully above the cost of living of Portland, and then spend that money here for taxes, essentially. God, what's the next point?
Yeah, I mean, to really stem onto the job outlook and how it's just being decimated, another good bullet point within the article was saying how people are starting to leave because the income that you can not just keeping up with what the remaining U.S. economy is trying to do. And so in layman's term is Portland is not paying their people enough. And so the salaries are down, hourly wages are down. Yes, it is more than, Minnesota, all the southern states, but if groceries are expensive, if housing is expensive, like affordability, if the average is $73,000 in Portland Metro, but the homes are still skyrocketing about 3 to 5% year over year because that's just natural real estate appreciation. If I have to buy food or buy a house, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy food to take care of my family.
I think another thing we really need to consider is not just buying a house, but renting as well. People need to live hey, I'm sure we're going to talk about the homelessness in this current event here. If rent is going up, and also the mortgage rates, right, or just what a regular mortgage would be per month is also going up, and your income's not going up, you cannot live here. You have to go further. And again, people think about, am I going to live an hour away just to work in Portland for less dollars than I could if I move somewhere else? So again, it really is. It's the job market that, my God, dictates everything. And hopefully we're going to talk about what we think the government should do. Maybe not. I don't know, Fawn. What's your next point?
I mean, that pretty much, I mean, it's tough to say what the government's going to do. I mean, I think there are some positives that we should probably consider talking about. Like, I mean, major businesses, yes, they've left Portland Metro, but yeah, I mean, why did Ritz-Carlton just build that massive tower? Like I think there is a lot of positives in what's happening, and I can tell our local government is trying to improve. But the last little tidbit of the urban doom loop is real estate attractiveness. This is something you mentioned, we were off air, we were talking about it, that Portland is ranked out of 81 total metro cities within the whole US. We're ranked 80th.
That's second to last.
Dallas, Fort Worth area ranked number 1, and Hartford, I think that's Connecticut, was beat us. And so what is real estate attractiveness? This is more towards like the investment side, like real estate people coming in, maybe buying an office building or multiple housing sectors and trying to come up with a game plan of, is this city a good asset to invest our hard-earned money in? And we're ranked almost dead last. And so that gives us an idea of not only just the economic outlook of Portland, but the real estate sector. Yes, it's more important towards like maybe the commercial side is, but if the money is not flowing into Portland, how else is money going to flow in, especially if these high earners, with all these Intel layoffs, all these major companies, how is the Portland going to increase tax revenue? Are they going to put it on consumers like you and I? And that's the doom loop, essentially.
Well, yay for doom. I will say, and I think that, we have about a little over 5 minutes left on this episode. I want to talk about the positives of Portland. Okay. That was a lot of doom. This is if things do not change. Okay. And some of the feedback I received from a couple listeners is we sometimes are a little too doom and gloom. So I do want to focus on some positives about the Portland metro market. Some things to really consider still is Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles and Portland are the 4 major metro areas of the West Coast. West Coast, best coast. We are the most affordable, and we probably will always be the most affordable as those 3 keep going up. The big thing here is incentive for business to come. We need businesses to hire, right? So I know the government's working on a lot of things. I think you mentioned it. The local government is really trying. Last year, between Multnomah County, this is just a plus about things we're doing. Last year, Multnomah County, Washington County, Clackamas County spent $335 million to try to help fix the homeless problem here in the Portland metro area. That's a lot of freaking money.
Yeah. And you can see it these days. Like, crime in downtown Portland metro has dramatically declined. I think I read this a while ago. Fentanyl deaths have decreased as well within the downtown area. Then I know, since they're pumping so much money, millions of dollars, I know part of that is emergency shelters are starting to pop up more within the Portland metro. And I guess one last thing is, I know the police force, the Portland Police Department,
Yes.
I guess, I don't know what they're called.
The Portland Police Department.
Yeah, you see them more often. And so there is money being filled because police is important, in my opinion.
And the reason this is the fact, people, and I'm not trying to besmirch homeless people and people downtrodden in life, committing crime to feed their family. Okay, I get it. But in the big picture scheme of things, businesses look at crime rates, businesses look at safety, businesses look at people moving into states. You talk to people outside of the state, they're like, is it still like a hellhole after the BLM riots? Like, you have to listen to that, and the government has to listen to that to get people attracted to Portland again. And I think you're totally right. We're seeing a huge decrease in fentanyl overdoses, which was a huge problem here in Portland. Let's just be upfront. And a big reason was the decriminalization of drugs. I call Portland, and I say this, and I'm going to curse here, I call Portland the capital of fuck around and find out. Okay? There was a time, this is about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they spent $86,000 on booth kits for homeless people. If you don't know what booth kits are, have a fun Google search. You use it to take drugs. Okay. So that's what they were doing. They were giving out booth kits. Now, though, I don't even know what to say about that. And now we have shifted from that. We are repealing the decriminalization. We have a larger police department because we have enough time between the defund the police era. And they, again, fuck around and find out. When you defund all these police, guess what happens? You get people with samurai swords chasing workers coming out of Portland brewery. Yes, that is a real story. And spending $335 million on the homeless issue, it has worked. I just want to give you a statistic here that I just pulled up that I read the other day. Of all the people that were housed in emergency shelter beds last year, 85 to 96% remained in that housing a year later. That's really good. The reason why homeless people, tend not to stay in these shelter beds is because you are not allowed to use illegal substances. And so people are like, fuck that. Sometimes. Now, I know there's a lot of other issues. I know there's a lot of abuse issues there, sexual assault there. But the fact that we have retained 85 to 96% shows that we're doing something right. We're putting people up. So that is working. And just gut feeling, it does seem better. It seems much safer.
Yeah, things are definitely better. And to kind of just wrap up on this current event, are we in a doom loop right now? I don't think so. Again, just based off of article and economic outlook, I think it's just good to know that we're on the precipice of it, that it's having this article and all these new outlets really talk about it is really just going to light a fire on the local governments to really like shape it up. Because I seriously do think there is an issue economic wise, and economic wise it's important to follow because this is your groceries, this is your housing, these are your kids, these are your schools. This is where your hard-earned tax dollars are going to. And if we're being taxed higher for no higher or better improvements on incentives and programs, then why live in Portland Metro? Man, sorry to try to be so doom and gloom on every single episode, but I think where Wes and I come from is we'd rather be realistic. You know, we don't want to paint such a pretty picture that you should just buy a house, that you should really look into the ramifications, both not just real estate, but the whole economy and what 5 and 10 and 15 years down the line could look like for your young family. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. I think also something that another analogy here is, I'm sure would you play football, high school?
Yeah.
You look like a football player. Yeah. There's always the saying that don't be upset if your coach is hard on you. Start to worry if your coach stops paying attention to you.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. It's because they care. And the reason we bring this stuff up is because we care. We want it to turn back around. I love living here. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I mean, we're both transplant. You came from California. I came from Texas. I mean, these aren't easy moves.
They are not. And I love it here. I love it in the Pacific Northwest. Portland is like the foodie capital. It's because these restaurateurs that can't afford Seattle or the Bay Area, they come here. And so we're known for that. Lean into that. But do know our local government is trying, and we're just airing this out because we care and want you to be aware of it. As we move through the next year or so, we're going to hopefully see major changes, because the reason this article was brought to our attention, and I have a friend that's been to some of these meetings where they talk about, we're 80 out of 81 for real estate attractiveness. They're talking about it, and they're trying to fix it. Also, I really like our new mayor. Our new mayor is apparently Ted Lasso in real life. I don't know if you saw that. This dude sounds like a good dude. So I'm hopeful, but just now you are equipped with information.
Yeah,
that's what our point is here.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful. And like you said, we'd rather give you all of the facts. This is all breaking news information. Like, this isn't like months ago. This isn't 24. This is what's happening now. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a good stopping point right there.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, I'm Wesley with Mayton Real Estate, your buyer specialist, signing off.
And I'm Fong, Mr. Doom and Gloom, the seller specialist, also signing off.
And we will see you next week. Take care.
Take care.